Hey everybody, me Foxy D, and I'm going to continue with, I call them short and sweet. I'm going to try to make them shorter and sweeter. All right, the video series on the road to wellness. Today we're going to talk about emotion. Okay, so again, it's a core part of who we are. We think of things in terms of body mind. Well, we got body, mind, emotion, right? And by mind, I mean intellectual mind and spirit. So today we're going to tackle the emotion part. I'm going to be referring heavily on my notes. All right. So here we go. Healing the emotional self. So you're going through this very difficult time. I absolutely relate. And self compassion is key in certain instances. And this is definitely one of them. And what in certain instances? In all instances, the first person that you have to respect, revere, and love is definitely yourself. Now, I'm not going to say that if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. Actually, it appears that is not true. Allow me. So let's get into it. And I don't mind the fact, again, give me a thumbs down if you don't like it, but try to comment. Let me know what you think. I really want to know what your opinions are on these matters. Because like I said, I don't consider myself a professional. I'm just a layperson who has a lot of experience being mobbed. Okay. And I am also very morally sound, very high on the honesty humility scale. And I'm just going to give you the benefit of what I believe is the benefit of my knowledge. Not like an arrogant putz, but just sharing what I have gone through and what I deeply know. You can verify, you'll have different opinions, that's fine. But here we go. Healing the emotional self. So, why is it so important? I'll tell you why. Shame, guilt, stress, self criticism. All of this stuff leads to anxiety, depression, and sometimes suicide. You know, like the stats are pretty ugly. A lot of people who have gone through workplace mobbing commit suicide. A lot of them, and I suspect highly, even though it's not really touched upon. There is this one author. Her name is Heather Hodgson. I have not read her books, but she has said that she addresses, I read this in a post on Facebook, that she addresses the topic of people going postal at work. Okay, so taking it out on people. These are consequences. We have to look at this as being fact. So once your emotions are disturbed to this level, a lot of bad things happen, all right, to the self and to other. Allow me. So all of these things, again, shame, guilt, stress, anxiety, self-criticism, depression are often byproducts of a dysfunctional system. So that could be family, workplace, community, all right? In addition to being byproducts of a dysfunctional system, they're also byproducts of a dysfunctional or imbalanced self, are four core components that I keep referring to. So the self and the system work bidirectionally with each other, all right? But say the self as well, those components, mental, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional, also work bidirectionally. That means if they're off kilter or imbalanced, you're going to have some issues, all right? On either plane or all four of them. So let's start with the most important element. Even in a mobbing, I'm not going to concentrate on the others. I'm going to concentrate on self. This is the most important part. Why is it the most important part? It's all of these people doing these terrible things to me. Look, the only thing that you can control in these situations is you and your reactions and your actions. So allow me. If you are in the midst of a mobbing, the core of who you are, that means your self-concept, self-esteem, feelings of self-worth are under attack. Your job, beyond just doing your work and trying to stick it out, is to protect, honor, and respect yourself. Now, I haven't reached, I've done some research in terms of neuroscientific evidence of what I'm talking about to back it up. But I haven't done so in an in-depth manner. So I'm the type I like to do my research. So it means 5 at least academic research articles to back up what I'm saying. I have not done that. So, but I can offer you the following, all right? And we could do all the fact checking we want afterwards. Again, I'm speaking through my experience and through my intuition right now. And through these studies. So I offer you this. There have been studies, rat studies, done on abused versus non-abused rats. There are certain changes that happen in the animal's brain. So this is from memory from way back, 2005. I will find the researchers and I will post the link at the bottom. This is pure memory from when I took abnormal psych, all right, back in 2005 or 2006. So they had done these studies on these rats. So what they did is they had an abusive rat mom, all right, with her little rat pups. And so how did they make her abusive? Well, her cage was very uncomfortable. There was noise that was emitted constantly. So the rat was under a great amount of stress because they manipulated the environment. So she was a bad mom, bad rat mom. Okay. So she kind of neglected her little rat pups. She would bite them. She was nasty with them. And then they had the other rat who was a good rat mom. So she was all comfortable, everything was good. They had soothing music in the background, and the lighting wasn't on all the time, etc., etc. So she was the good rat mom. What they had done a couple of weeks after the rats were born is they switched litters, put them each with a different mom. And the results were pretty astounding. You would assume, of course, that the little abused pups would love being nurtured and cared for, but they were under an increased amount of stress. So they were like not enjoying being nurtured and cared for. All right. And of course, the little healthy rat pups that had been previously taken care of were also very distressed. So it was interesting. It's almost like the abused pups preferred the abusive mom. Well, at the end of the study, what did they do? They took the rats. I mean, it's going to sound brutal, but it is scientific study. I don't tout it, but it's there. So we'll look at it. So they took the rats and they chopped off their heads and they took a look at their brains and they realized one thing. They noticed that the amygdala, that's the oldest part of the human brain. Okay, it's the emotional part. Okay, the part that somehow helps regulate emotion. All right, and is involved in the whole fight or flight thing. So it's the oldest part of the brain. And in these abused rat pups, the amygdala was huge, like really, really big. Okay. And in the rats who had been previously non-abused, their amygdalas weren't as big, but they were bigger than just healthy rat pups who had had their heads chopped off. So there's a part of your brain that changes when you go through these abusive things. Okay? The beauty of the brain is that there's this thing called neuroplasticity. All right. So even in your older years, okay, it's not necessarily that you're able to build all kinds of new pathways. All right. But the brain, the structural changes can occur. So how does that happen? Well, I'll give you a bit more background information and then we'll talk about that. The road to literally healing yourself. Okay, so here we go. I looked at some other studies. Dr. Kristen Neff, she has a PhD in moral development, which I find amazing. I think this is a really understudied area. Okay, so, and she concurs, she says, of course, the amygdala is the oldest part of the brain, and this is verbatim, and is designed to quickly detect threats in the environment. When we experience a threatening situation, the fight or flight response is triggered. The amygdala sends signals that increase blood pressure, adrenaline, the hormone cortisol, mobilizing the strength and energy needed to confront or avoid a threat. All right? So all of these things are going off and being triggered. Now, although the system was designed by evolution to deal with physical attacks, it is activated just as readily by emotional attacks. So think about that for a moment. All right? So when I say that all of the components of self are interrelated, they really are. I'm trying to kind of break it down. I don't mean to say that we have these 4 unique parts. They're all interrelated. But today we're going to talk about that emotional response. It's very important. Literally, it leads to changes in your brain. Think about that for a moment. Okay, so a little fact checking is in order. However, I'll offer you this as well. I've been told by a very close clinical social worker friend of mine that the areas of the brain that are involved in self-compassion, self-love, differ somewhat from the areas that are involved in compassion towards others. That's why I started this video by saying, when people say, well, you can't love others if you don't love yourself. That's not necessarily true. A lot of people don't even know what it means to really love themselves. A lot of people confound certain things like niceness for kindness. They're 2 very different concepts. We'll get into that later, however. So here we go. I'm going to talk about what happens and what you should do. What are self-soothing techniques? Okay? So when you're going through this emotional bombardment, a lot of us, like what, and again, I didn't do the right things, all right? But I'll tell you what I did do, and I'm not advising that you do this. What I did is I engaged in my dysfunctional habits. I was smoking. I like to drink every so often. You know what? Maybe I was drinking a little more than I usually do. I like discussing things, so I was engaging in a lot of arguing. Okay, which is isn't very healthy because what I noticed is when I engaged in those habits, you know what? It gave me almost like a rush. It was very bizarre. So I started getting angry about things, say when it came to the arguing, and the more I argued, the angrier I got. So it just kind of revved up that negative emotion. And I thought to myself, I said, well, wait a second now. I can't just stuff it in. I got to let it out, right? Anyhow, what I did, and again, with the help of my spouse and with the help of some very, very good friends, okay, who were there for me throughout this entire time, I did seek help. And I went to see it happened to be the clinical social worker that I'm referring to, and she was marvelous. And what she did, she acted as a guide for me. And she explained something when I was saying, like, hey, I have all this emotion. I got to get rid of it somehow. Beyond just doing the exercise that helps you release, the cortisol, the adrenaline, and all of those stress related hormones, she said, girl, you got to engage in wise mind. And I said, what is wise mind? I don't understand. She goes, well, tell you what, you got the intellectual component of your mind and you have the emotional component. And sometimes they're at odds with each other. You might know what to do intellectually, right? Oh, this is a situation that, I know they're trying to, like, say, for instance, your mobbers are trying to get an emotional reaction out of you, okay? Your intellect will say, uh-oh, beep, beep, these people are trying to get emotional reaction out of me, so I won't give it to them. But then you have that emotion that you have to cram down inside, okay? And that's not good either. So what wise mind is the following. I'll give it to you very cut and dry. Breathe in wise. Hold it for like 4 seconds. Exhale. Mind. What that allows you to do, it's very interesting actually, but you have to be aware, all right? What that allows you to do is take a moment, even if for a few seconds, to understand that, one, you're being physically triggered right now, okay? Your amygdala is doing this, beep, 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 beep. There's a threat, okay? Your physiology is triggered, all right? And technically you could either blurt out, yeah, you're a bunch of dicks, okay, or whatever. Or you could say nothing, but there's an in-between. The in-between is wise mind. You're kind of making the emotion mind and the intellectual mind more cohesive. So you could take a breath, depending on what the situation is, sit back and do this. Or say, just a moment, I'm not comfortable with what you said, I'll get back to you. You're acknowledging both the emotional part and the intellectual part and taking a needed break. So that's one technique, is the wise mind. What does it entail? It entails, one, being aware of that trigger and when you get set off. All right. For me, my issue, because of my past abuse and narcissistic abuse that I never really confronted, all right, that I confronted on a very superficial level, I had a problem with distress tolerance. So that was my trigger for myself. That's what really hurt me, right? But once you're aware, it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's true. My body sends me these signals. My intuition is telling me that something is off, right? My body's sending me these signals, and yes, it feels good to release. It feels wonderful, doesn't it? For the moment, okay? But if you're engaging in, either releasing that anger, it brings about more anger. It becomes like a circular pattern, right? And as you get deeper and deeper into that pattern, you're just playing right into their hands and into the game. Another thing that my therapist recommended to me, which I thought was wonderful, we engaged in something called dialectical behavior therapy, all right? So it's a dialectic. You get to talk about all of these things. You get to recognize some of the tools that you've never really learned. There were a lot that I hadn't learned. Again, given my background and my history, there were a lot of very simple things that sounded so elegant when I heard them and so easy that I said, I've never learned that. It's pretty amazing. So one, seek therapy. Two, try to engage in wise mind. All right? Part of wise mind also is the practice of something called mindfulness. So that'll touch more upon the spiritual part, but I will get there eventually. All right. So other things that you could do to try to regulate those dysfunctional patterns. All right, and to try to keep yourself emotionally in check. Wise mind is essential at the workplace as you're trying to get out. All right, and navigate your way out of the workplace. Again, I'm going to tell you, do not stay past stage 3. Stage 3 is the critical incident. Stage 3 is when you know that management is not on your side, nor will they be. Why do not stay past stage 3? Well, I've done it. I've stayed throughout. They never pushed me out the first 2 mobbings, and I will explain why. I put my head down, my behind up, okay, and I sold my soul. And I sold it for pretty cheap. How awful, but I have to admit this is the truth. Here I am. Once you get to the stage of awareness, there's no going back. So I have to own that part. I have to own that part that, you know what? Again, I was the taker in the prison, if you know what I mean. Ass up, head down. It was horrible. Sold my soul, numbed myself, okay? And I would not recommend anyone do that. Ever. Take a job that even offers less money, all right? Less stress. Get yourself well. You're worth a lot more than this. I'm going to tell you that. So, now that it's your choice ultimately. I'm just telling you from the core of my person, okay? Other things that you could do to regulate your emotions. Make a list of things that you love. You might love to write. Again, I had recommended journaling previously, all right? Now, you know, to journal about the experiences is also very good, but limit the time that you do that. Again, keep it, you know, to 15 minutes a day in terms of journaling, not longer. Why? Because if you indulge yourself too much in your own pain, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't have to believe me on this. If you try to engage in it yourself, you'll see that what I'm saying is true. There's an addictive component to it. Do not fall in love with your pain or your victimhood. Know your core. Courage and love and wisdom are interrelated. All right? If you're feeling, and if you're getting mobbed, typically it means that you're pretty amazing. And there's something about your vibe that they don't like. You're really good at your job. And you're a person of integrity. For the most part. Not all the time, but for the most part. You have to recognize that in yourself. So this idea of self-compassion comes into play. So what else? Write down what your hobbies are. Engage in them. Something that I really love doing throughout this whole thing was, well, unfortunately it set off my back issues, but I liked weeding my garden. There's actually a therapy, it's called Morimoto therapy. It's a Japanese therapy that involves horticulture. So removing all of these weeds was very symbolic for me. I took my time. It was a meditative process. Now, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just doing this, and it felt so good. I love to draw, so I started drawing again. All of those things kind of gave me a little bit of a boost in the meantime, even though I was engaging in some pretty negative behaviors until I started therapy. So that's it for now. You could thumbs down me. I invite you to do so. However, please provide some commentary. I really do. I want to get a global perspective out there. I want us to share in this. Not about me, just sharing what I know. I'm sure you know a heck of a lot of different things that I don't know. All right? So I invite this bidirectionality. I also invite you to subscribe to my channel, like or dislike the video, and please comment. I really enjoy that, and I enjoy it because it opens my mind too. In any case, I want to thank you, and I send you peace, love, respect, self-respect, and self-love. Foxy D, signing off. Namaste, beautiful people.